Why can't we put down that food? Why can't we read that book we want to read? Why don't we exercise more? Why are we so rude or cold to our partner? Why are we afraid of heights? You name it. What I find is it comes down to the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. So what I've learned over the years is that just about every problem that we have, not external problems are things that need to be dealt with through feedback, through action, through intention. I'm talking about why we can't seem to overcome certain challenges. Why can't we put down that food? Why can't we read that book we want to read? Why don't we exercise more? Why are we so rude or cold to our partner? Why are we afraid of heights? You name it. What I find is it comes down to the sympathetic branch of the autonomic nervous system. What I mean by that is, while we're children and we're dealing with life, anytime something happens that looks like it could be dangerous, it sends a signal into the body to try and run or fight. It's a very primitive system. It's just a lot of adrenaline and cortisol to move fast, basically, or move hard, hit hard. And there are some of these patterns that are already wired, you know, like falling, loud noises. Being alone is another pattern. Baby doesn't like to look around and be alone, being hungry, being thirsty, being cold, being hot. So the baby is not a self-regulating system. It needs a parent to regulate the system. And so when the baby's overstimulated, the parent can calm it down. When the baby is understimulated, the parent can stimulate the child with whatever, you know, some toys or something. And as it's growing old, getting older, it's dealing with all these potential dangers. Some are real dangers, like fire or sharp objects, and some things are just perceived dangers, like loud noises or something happening too fast, right? And so let's look at a perfect example of how a child learns to be in a world where there could be a fire in a house called a fireplace, right? And so a baby walks up to a fire. You have a good parent that takes that baby's hand and shows the baby the fire, moves the hand a little closer until the baby starts to feel the heat. And here's the key: it's slow, it's successive, and it's incremental. And the words hot, 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 right? So the baby gets a little closer. So as soon as that happens, they still have an arousal, like, hey, what's going on? This is unknown and bizarre and even a little uncomfortable. But once the baby realizes where that boundary is, it can get a little closer, and then it starts to learn when the sparks, you know, pop out of the fire. There's a spark arrestor, and the baby starts getting comfortable with this potentially dangerous situation, right? And now, a couple months go by, and that baby or child can now sleep by a fireplace. Same thing happens with a dog, right? You know, a dog to a 2-year-old is like Godzilla. Could you imagine sitting in your room and some animal you've never seen before, bigger than you, comes screaming and running into a room, barking, right? Like Godzilla? It would terrify you, right? So a good parent would take a child, prepare them about seeing a dog they're about to see, and the dog's and reframing it as the dog's really happy and he's going to bark a lot, he's going to get excited and want to play. And you would take that dog on the leash, and that baby would see this dog and this new behavior, and it's loud and it's unfamiliar and it's overwhelming, but it's incremental. So it takes a little bit of it and then gets a little closer, gets excited, little scared, closer, scared, closer, scared, closer. Dog starts smelling it, dog gets a little excited, baby readjusts, gets comfortable with it, realizes it's safe, and suddenly the baby and the dog are having a great time, the baby's laughing, and then all of a sudden that baby's now sleeping on the dog 5 hours later. So that baby now has very low arousal in the brain and body when it comes to a dog. So it's become an extension of that baby, in a sense, of a pleasant extension, right? And so when the baby now thinks about the dog, dopamine lifts and excitement to see that dog, kind of reward because it knows it's pleasant. So it gets excited to go to Aunt Mary's house, that child now, right? And so this is how we learn. right? And this happens in every area, Think about waking up in the morning, right? How many of us have parents that started screaming to get us up in the morning? So the transition from sleep to wake is a shock transition rather than a gentle arousal transition. If the parent went up to that child and said, "Good morning, how you doing? Did you sleep okay?" and maybe touch their hair and say, "I have some breakfast waiting for you over there. When you're ready, you cozy? Did you sleep?" And that child's attention will start to move into the kitchen, arousal will start, and that child will suddenly get up and go to the kitchen and want to eat or play with the dog or whatever. And so these transitions are always happening in a child's life, from sleeping to waking, from not knowing something to a dog walking in, it's not knowing something to this fireplace, and the parent's criticism, being alone in a room, right? Anytime the stimulus is introduced and it's too much, too intense, too loud, too overwhelming, too unknown, too long, and the nervous system hasn't been able to integrate it, it kind of says, I don't know what to do with this. We don't know how to learn from it. Let's put this emotion into a little bubble somewhere in the body. And in that moment, we dissociate. Now the bubble's there. So guess what lives in the brain? Anything that was connected to that bubble. So if we suddenly go to a bunch of kids at school and we're late and all the kids are hanging out, we walk in and we don't know what to do with these looks, everyone looking at us, funny, we feel that emotion, and we don't know how to come back down. Now the emotion, fight, flight, or emotional discomfort, is now connected to two groups of children that we don't know. And so we never learn to get comfortable with new children. So that bubble stays, we have an image in our head, and we start to create, or we start to get what's called social anxiety. We start avoiding patterns that look like that because we never got comfortable. We never learned how to be in a different way and get comfortable in that place. So we figured better off just ignore it or avoid it. Just like fire. If that heat was too hot, too fast, and the child wasn't able to deal with it, that child will always have that fear of that fireplace or that dog because they haven't integrated it. That's why sometimes I think what amusement parks could do to even double the amount of people that go to them, especially places with very, very high roller coasters, right, is to have another park that has these successive incremental roller coasters. Because what I found is, and I saw it happening with my children, which is if you take a child and you throw them like 6 inches into the air, they get excited, they get scared, but you catch them and they feel that that's doable and they get used to that. And then you can increase that to like a foot and then 2 feet. And at one point, there's some children, you could be throwing them 10 feet up in the air and catching them, and they love it because they learn to be comfortable with the falling sensation because they integrate it and got better and better and better and better at it, right? But you take a child and you just put them on a roller coaster for the first time and it's a huge drop. It's too much. The brain hasn't been able to process the falling sensation, and so it kind of gets stuck as a pattern to avoid. So anytime there's that falling sensation, or even looking down from a building and you imagine you're falling, that feeling will overwhelm that child or that adult at this point until they learn to master that falling sensation and reorganize it or reintegrate it slowly into the system so it's not as overwhelming as it was the first time. And this is pretty much in every area of our lives, you'll see that this is what's happening. No matter what it is, it's the body not knowing how to be comfortable with that stimulus, never learning how to get comfortable and what to do about it. So it creates a bubble that we react to. And then this is that bubble, by the way, unprocessed, is what I find we call boredom or restlessness. Why we can't sit in our bodies and just sit in a room for a couple of minutes or even an hour just sitting there, because it's a sensation that we have to be doing something, because if we're present, that sensation starts to come to the surface and we don't know how to integrate it. We don't know how to release it or discharge it. So it starts to create a fantasy or an avoidance or some kind of coping. Maybe we'll get something to eat or drink or buy something, anything to get us out of our physical bodies. So the more of these little bubbles we have, the more dissociated we are from the body and the more afraid we are of the body's experiences. And so we don't feel the joy that's in the body. We just feel the fear of running away from it. So then joy just simply becomes an escape from the body. Great escapes, dissociation, stimulation, tons of dopamine, food, video games, jumping out of airplanes, television, something to get us out of the body. So we get really excited about life, but then we become these reward-seeking addicts because we don't know what real appreciation and joy is. We confuse happiness with reward-seeking chemistry, a little different. One is appreciation, oxytocin, serotonin. The other one is excitement for something. And excitement is a much more powerful driver because it kept us alive. It keeps us chasing that gazelle, the excitement. And appreciation is more of a passive experience of being comfortable. But if we're uncomfortable, the body says, well, we better do something if we're uncomfortable. And if it sees a solution, we get very excited. And that's how people sell us things. They trigger the fear and they give us a solution and we get very excited about it. And this is why it's important to start to use mindfulness. There are many ways into the body. There's mindfulness, peripheral biofeedback, neurofeedback, tapping, EFT, brain spotting, EMDR, open focus, one of my favorites, circle therapy and hypnosis, body work, acupuncture. Anything that moves the trapped energy will help us to get more in a place of receiving, and that state, that first state of receiving, a sense of positive expectancy, and that's when dopamine starts to lift in a different way. It lifts to like create wonderful things out there rather than lifts in order to self-regulate something in here. That's when it becomes an addictive cycle rather than a creative cycle. One is, I don't like this sensation in my body. What can I do to get back to baseline or homeostasis? Do I need to come up? Do I need to come down? Do I need to go into a better mood? Do I need to numb my mood, right? And so that solution becomes wired as excitement to get rid of my negative emotions. That's a craving addiction cycle. When you've mindfully processed and self-regulated through emotional discomfort, then you can start considering something and really feel what it feels like to have it. And that creates its own cycle of desire where you want the same thing you already have. And it's more creative and unadulterated desire as opposed to angst or craving or a sense of suffering, basically, of wanting. I hope that helps. I'm Joe Tabb for the Tabb Technique, and I'll see you soon.